Welcome everyone to this third webinar in our series of 4, looking at the shadow and the gifts of Aquarius. It's really good to look at the shadow of Aquarius because it's not something that a lot of people have even considered there is one. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniel. And Daniel, do you want me to go ahead and put my slides up now, or do you want to just...
Not quite yet. I'll just make a couple of opening remarks. If I was to title this in a different way, I think the primary theme of us gathering here today is to answer the question, what does it mean to be human? What does that actually mean? We are experiencing, and the first talk, the one we did, the first of this is the third, but in the first one, we talked a great deal about Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, how it fits into the world ages, and how we're at a very significant point. And what could we say? The deconstruction of the world system, global reset. In fact, I want to even go so far to say that this global event, I mean, certainly there are parts of the world that are hunter-gatherers, there are parts of the world that are, that are not involved in technology or the world system so much, but there has not been an event like this, in my opinion, globally, since 12,800 years ago, which is when it was a catastrophe that eliminated the technology and the world systems that were in place at that point. And there were seed people then, and they helped seed the restarting of everything. Now we're at another point where there's like a global event. I mean, my own gut level feeling is there's way more to come. I mean, this is just like the opening salvo of the global reset. So our question really is, well, then reset to what? And that's the main themes that we're going to be describing today. First, by looking at the astrology, will be some of the primary themes that involve the relationship between Saturn and Uranus, and the relationship between Taurus and Aquarius. And these themes have been building for a long time, as you'll see with some of the research that we've done on this. We're going to be including here looking at a lot of charts, including something that I haven't. There may be other people out there that are researching this, and I certainly invite collaboration on it. But having been a China watcher since in the late 60s, I was a China history major, learned the Chinese language, and have watched the development of China. I actually, full disclosure, I took the Kool-Aid in the mid 60s and thought Mao was a good guy, right? I've since learned a lot of things by reading his biographies, and we're going to look at Mao's chart, we're going to look at the chart of the People's Republic of China, but there's very strange relationships between the US chart and the chart of the People's Republic of China. That'll be one of the things we're going to look at with the charts. We also are going to be looking at the charts of some of the leading technocrats, the ones that seem to be running the agenda at this point, and to kind of come up with a thesis about who they represent and what they're about. We have some data to share, but mainly this is going to be a philosophical. If we look at all the cards on the table, you're free with your own intuition to try to put these pieces together. It's going to be very difficult for me not to every so often interject what my own conclusions on it are, but I'm not trying to say that I have any answers here, other than what I've seen develop over the last couple of years. And actually, I want to take it back to 1972, There was a book that came out at that point by a writer named William Braden. It was called Aquarius. And the subtitle was Utopia or Armageddon. And he basically was suggesting, as he saw it in 1972, and this is on the heels of all the Age of Aquarius stuff that was happening at that point, that he basically said this could go in the direction of humanistic matriarchy, or it could go in the direction of technocracy. Now, humanistic matriarchy, you know, that's kind of like late 60s stuff, you know, the Age of Aquarius, tribalism, indigenous, back to the land, true democracies, freedom, freedom to be your own archetype, freedom to be yourself, you know. I mean, that was sort of the humanistic matriarchal approach, and including in the early 70s, you know, the beginning of the women's movement and gay liberation and all those things. It was, so there seemed to be a sense that would be a possibility, right? But he also looked at it from the perspective of computers and looked at it from the perspective of the whole dream of technocracy that was happening in the 30s. And so he was suggesting that he actually was a little pessimistic, and he said he thought that's the direction probably would take place. And we've arrived at that. And I think it is associated with the shadow of Aquarius. So in a sense, humanistic matriarchy, coming from the countercultural Aquarian age views at that point, was usually local, earth-centered stuff, right? While technocracy is almost always associated with globalism. Now, Kaylin, maybe before we go into the information and the data on these 5 main players, the 2 signs and the 3 planets, bring up the definition of technocracy, because some people may not know what I'm referring to here.
Okay, I can do that. Here we go.
A form of government where scientists and technical experts are in control. A society where those who govern justify themselves by appealing to technical experts who use scientific forms of knowledge to support their decisions. This arose in the 1930s. And actually, the grandfather of Elon Musk was the head of the Canadian Technocracy political party. And they attempted to implement this at that time period to eliminate democracy and to just have a bunch of technical experts be in control of the culture. That included IBM giving the first computer card system to the Nazis. You know, that was sort of the beginning of papers, please. You know, that was an early version of technocracy, but it failed for 2 reasons. One, it failed was because of World War II, okay? And number 2, it failed because they realized that they could not institute this because they did not have the ability to track everybody. And so the technology did not exist to be able to truly implement it on the level they wanted to. So, and so the technocracy also includes eugenics, Darwinism, survival of the fittest, that version of it, social Darwinism. So it was, and it actually, believe it or not, goes all the way back to Plato, who saw like a kind of a caste system, you know, and you have like these philosopher kings that run everything, and he even believed it was based upon the family you were born into. You know, it was ingrained. You know, you were going to be a worker, you were going to be a slave, you know, and their version of democracy was just, you know, the small limited number of white ruling class, right? So anyway, you need to know about technocracy. It is in the air, and it's one of the aspects of Aquarius. So just so you know what technocracy is. Now let's go to our planetary players at this time.
You want the planetary players first?
Yeah.
Okay. So who do you want to start with?
Saturn. Why not Saturn? Yeah, because okay, so just so you can tune in on this, there's 3 planets that we'll be referring to in this presentation. Saturn, Uranus primarily, and then Jupiter as an expansive trigger. You know, so like if we look back in history, anytime there's an outer planet configuration, whether it was the one in 1988-89, whether it was the one in 1964 to 69, whenever Jupiter showed up, it just put it on steroids. You know, it kind of expanded whatever that particular complex was. So Saturn, and we did talk about this in class number 1, it's like an operating manual: structure, groundedness, discipline, responsibility. It's a big story to get into what Saturn was about before patriarchy, before monotheistic religions, before guilt and shame, before the ideas of the fall. I mean, Saturn was just a third dimensional reality. You know, you can't jump off the high chair and without being, you know, crashed to the ground. You can't fly. There's certain ways in which the structure of life operates. You know, so Saturn keeps boundaries, sets boundaries, and then through those set of boundaries, assist us in making changes or not. You know, so Saturn is like an enforcer. It's also the ego. It's the highest. It's the limit of our egoic consciousness. Beyond Saturn are the transcendental planets: Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, and so on. So whatever sign Saturn is in, and it stays in a sign for 2.5 years, is giving a primary theme of what kind of boundaries that Saturn is trying to impose, or what kind of operating manual that Saturn is involved with at any given time. Now, it's very interesting that Saturn was most recently, we have can you easily go to that slide that has the Saturn in Aquarius info?
The dates, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Saturn and Uranus, this is some of the basic data. So Saturn in Aquarius, and this is, I'm getting the dates here are the beginning of the 2.5 year period. 1932, 1962, 1991, March 2020. And I think it's extremely significant that we decided to do this class after, you know, right at the point of the first ingress of Saturn into Aquarius. It's going to go back into Capricorn and will not be fully into Aquarius until the conjunction with Jupiter at the end of the year. So you can do research on this. You know, what is Saturn Aquarius and at those time frames? You might notice that Saturn moving into Aquarius in 1962, you know, corresponds to what the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School feels to be the beginning of the time frame we refer to as the turning of the ages. So, I mean, that's Saturn in Aquarius. And so we haven't discussed Aquarius yet, but just keep that in mind regarding Saturn. So let's go to Uranus.
Okay.
Uranus teaches, surprises, unexpected changes. Uranus has like a dual nature. And when Uranus was first discovered, there was a controversy. Do we name it Uranus after an original sky god? Or do we name it after Prometheus, the one who stole fire from the gods? You know, so built into Uranus are both concepts. So there's the spaciousness and high witness, or the way that Jeff Green put it, freedom from the known. You know, so it's outside the boundaries of what we've already known, but it also is revolutionary. On a personal level, it's accepting your unique expression, finding others like yourself through that, non-acceptance and acceptance of what is. Actually, we were talking about this before the call. Uranus is also like, you know, question everything and revolt against what has been in place for too long. You know, so it's changed for its own sake. But it also can be revolutionary. And the weird thing is that when you put Saturn together with Uranus, you can also get the egoic thing that Zeus warned Prometheus against. Okay, you got the fire, you know, you stole the fire from the gods, and now, well, we're not going to take it back from you. But to beware of two things: hubris, the belief you are a god, and number two, the forgetting about justice. You know, so these were the warnings to Prometheus. So both of those things are with Uranus. So it's revolutionary change, the unexpected, but also to be able to see a bigger view. And we'll see more of that with with Aquarius. So let's look and see what's happened historically with Uranus leading up to this point. Uranus in Taurus, 1934 to 1942. That was the last time that occurred. Now you'll notice that, and this was just, to be very honest with you all, I couldn't sleep much last night because I kept thinking about Uranus and Saturn. I mean, it's been on my mind for a couple of years now. Look, on May 3rd, 1942, when the Nazis were winning the war, when the Philippines fell to the Japanese. This was Uranus-Saturn conjunct 29 Taurus. So we have the union at that point of the Saturn and the Uranus energies in Taurus. Very interesting. You know, because I think this weaving theme of Saturn, Uranus, and Taurus and Aquarius has been building up to this time period for a long time. So if we look at the conjunctions of Saturn and Uranus, it's about every 45 years or so. So we have 1942. 1988, it was a triple conjunction of Saturn and Uranus. And look at the degrees: 29 Sag, 28 Sag, 27 Sag, galactic center in 1988. And then they all went into Capricorn the following year. And so basically a lot of the 10-degree orb material of this was actually in Capricorn, but the exact conjunction in 1988 was in these last couple degrees of Sagittarius. Interesting thing I noticed about 1988, a very significant thing happened in 1998. It was the first computer virus. 1988, interesting. But it was also the time, of course, of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and I'm not going to belabor this, so we have to cover a lot of material here. You do research, you know, 1942, the height of, you know, the war was going very badly, okay? 1988, 89, this is also when Bush was elected in November of 1988. And then the next one is in 2032 at 28 Gemini. The 10-degree orb is mainly in Cancer, though. You know, so that's this. These are like, it's to understand the relationship of Saturn and Uranus. You have to see it in a larger framework. So this big event that I believe is going to dominate 2021 is the Saturn-Uranus square, the last square, the first square since the conjunction was in year 2000. And interestingly, that square, Saturn was in Taurus and Uranus was in Aquarius. and now the square that will come up in 2021 is the other way around. Fascinating. And we also we'll look at the primary dates in 2021 a little bit later here. But let's go back now to the signs. Aquarius. The primary theme here, the main thing I wanted to focus on here in this presentation has to do with a deeper understanding of Aquarius and its shadow. There was very, very little consideration of its shadow in the late 60s, early 70s. Yes, it was going to be humanistic matriarchy. Yeah, we're going to go back to nature. We're going to become indigenous. We're going to be our own archetype. It'll be freedom. But it's a self-interest sign. Our definition of Aquarius, when we say self-interest, self-exploration, my short definition of Aquarius is having the courage to expand awareness as far as possible for its own sake. And connecting with it would be, brilliant, innovative, visionary, higher truth, higher love, freedom through expanded states of consciousness, big picture, further consciousness through revolutionary cutting-edge ideas, unexpected sudden changes, further evolutionary growth through the experience of freedom. So go to that next one, Kaylin. The shadow. I used to always love to give talks in the 70s when Aquarius was the glamour sign. And I would say, what is the shadow of Aquarius? And it turns out, the biggest shadow of Aquarius is the belief there is none. There is no shadow. So therefore we then have there's a rightness of one's views. I mean, as you probably all know, Aquarius is also, what used to be called in mainstream astrology, a fixed sign. But it's a thinking function thing, operating primarily in the mental realm, where it is believed all problems can be solved. Over-identified with technology. It's the mystery school of science. The only real way to solve issues. Science can save us. Overly detached, cool, aloof. Doesn't even need a body, actually. Checked out, disconnected from feelings in the body. No feeling function in it. You can have the thought form of universal love, but it's not operating from the feeling function. Light polarized, there is no shadow. And I recently heard this marvelous expression describing one of the other shadows of Aquarius, which is the astral hijack of the new age. Also, what I left out there, I didn't, over-identified with technology. So we could say the twin shadows of Aquarius is the over-reliance on science and technology, and then from the other side of the story, the astral hijack of the new age. I mean, like a lot of men with a lot of Aquarius would never be considered new age, but they're like into technology and science, and they generally are agnostic or atheist. I mean, but at their best, they're humanists. At their best, they're humanists, where they've connected with our primary question: what does it mean to be human? Also connected to the over-identification with technology. Another shadow of Aquarius, in my view, is all anti-human agendas, including AI. In a sense, it could be, and this is one of the themes that was going to come up once we look at Taurus next now, which is organic versus AI. So let us move to Taurus here. So it's an earth sign. It is of the earth, savoring and enjoying the garden of earthly delights, receiving embodied pleasure through the senses, exploring and savoring beauty, intimacy, aliveness, life force in the body, gratefully receiving the gift of sacred pleasure. Epicurean, seeking high quality pleasure for as long as possible without pain. It's a celebration of our physical incarnation. One of the things we do in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School is be involved in the revisioning of these signs in mystery schools. So often what I've noticed, and Kaylin, I know you and I have talked about this a lot, is that frequently the sun sign descriptions are more often than not a description of their shadow, not the actual mystery school aspect of it, what it's actually about. The celebrate, kind of like the Garden of Eden without the fall. Epicureanism, pleasure as deep as possible, as long as possible, but also within Epicureanism is the principle of moderation. So that if you ever do something that ends up feeling bad, you don't do that. I mean, it's always within the boundaries of that it continues to feel good, right? So it's not an extreme thing. It's a celebration of involution. I mean, in a sense, Aquarius's evolution. It's a masculine, archetypally masculine sign, going up to the thinking function, up to the higher witness, pure consciousness. While Taurus is fully embodied, it's an earth sign, and therefore we could say it's more associated with the shamanic path. I think that there has been attempts to combine the two through what is called cyber shamanism, but where it's like you use technology, but you're still connected to the land and the earth and so on. So this is not a diatribe against technology. It's just looking at the extremes that can happen if you just only go to technology, to AI, to just to believe in science will save us, as it were, and to forget the body. And it goes without saying that one of the agendas of the shadow of Aquarius is transhumanism. The idea that the singularity will happen and we can download our chip, or rather our consciousness, into a computer chip. That's part of the Silicon Valley cult, their belief in that. The rejection of the experience of death. We can be immortal, we don't ever have to go through death and life and death and life and death and life and be fully human. Okay, so that's the Taurus. Okay, so the Taurus shadow, I love this picture. And this is often what we get in sun sign descriptions, hoarding, resisting change, stuck in the material world, narcissistic, lazy, stubborn, rigid, security issues, taking rather than receiving, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's that, we don't want it all to be Taurus, we don't want it all to be Aquarius. So there's some kind of attempt here to have a communication between these two. Actually, just to interject something, when I do personal sessions, and if I'm looking at a chart where, let's say, has a Taurus moon and Mars in Aquarius, or there's a strong Taurian theme, but it's Aquarius rising. Those examples are the huge contrast. Like one dimension is like so totally different from the other. So that if you have Aquarius moon moving toward Taurus, well, then getting away from Aquarius and taking on Taurus. If it's Aquarius rising, well, then the idea is to become more, hopefully, in contact with the idealism, the humanitarianism, the democracy ideals of Aquarius. But we also have to take into account, when we look at these two, they're opposite. So when we think of Taurus, it also includes Scorpio. When we would take a look at Aquarius, we also are looking at Leo. And particularly and you're going to see some of these charts that we're going to be looking at here in a while, where this dynamic between Aquarius and Leo, in a short form of saying it, Aquarius is more the collective, and Leo is more, I'm in charge, so you have the attempt, I am the overlord, I am the king, it is my vision we follow. And so there's that interesting resonant polarity. I'm kind of sharing the downside of it, but let's talk about what the highest ideal of that is. And as I said at the beginning, maybe our inquiry is, what does it mean to be human? To me, the bottom line on this, and it's the choice we're all going to have to make certainly by the end of the year, if not early next year, when Jupiter and Saturn are both together in Aquarius. Do we choose who we really are, our autonomous sovereign self connected to divinity, or do we submit and give that away to some form of, those that know better? Well, the scientists must know, the doctors must know, the whole thing has been engineered to make us believe they are the experts, right? So to surrender our sovereignty to that is going to be a choice. And, of course, that includes the whole issue of vaccinations and digital money and, all the rest of that. That's all part of this inquiry. And we're all going to have to make those choices. And I'm certainly not going to be the one here coming from I'm obviously going to be sharing some of my personal opinions on this, but I don't want to control any of this. I have judgments about it, but it's every one of you's choice about how you want to deal with this issue of what does it mean to be human. And I can present it as the organic versus AI, being able to expose anti-human agendas. What does that mean? What does it mean to be human? And Taurus has a different answer than Aquarius does. But we're going to explore that as we go through. Yeah, I see a note. Yes. Is this a matter of individual choice? Yes, I do. I mean, that's certainly an Aquarian ideal that it should be. So let's look at, where do we have those Aquarius quotes? I think two that summarize the, these are, okay. The first one, you want to share that one, Kaylin? Yep. You're muted.
Oh, I have to unmute myself. I had to find the thing to do that. So one who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery. And I literally read this morning and I went, sounds kind of Aquarian to me. So yes. Because that's only looking at the mental realm and not really including all the other realms. And there can be, I guess, a level of mastery that comes from there, but that would be perhaps a limited point of view on that.
A really good example of that would be, and I know you and I both had our involvement with the Transcendental Meditation Organization, is that in that system, they described something called cosmic consciousness, which was the development of the witness. The ability to have a non-judgmental, non-evaluative way of it's like the ground of consciousness itself, the ultimate witness that's just seeing objectively everything.
Accessing pure consciousness. That was the whole point, right? Yeah.
But also the shadow of that was the fact that many people who had maybe not been used to this, when they tasted that experience, there was a lot of freakouts. I'm alone. I'm not connected to anything. I thought the spiritual path was supposed to be about love and compassion, not a cold witness that's just watching everything, right? Now, this is the one I loved the most. I used to follow this guy in the late 70s, in the late 80s, Val Valerian. He wrote something. He was a triple Aquarius, actually, and he had something. This is back when you'd get these things just printed form, right? And his motto for everything, and I thought this was a perfect example of the ideal of Aquarius: all life forms should have the right and the opportunity to have an existence which is endowed with the freedom to produce the maximum amount of probable lines of reality in an evolving direction by choice, without repression of awareness or manipulation of physical, mental, or spiritual aspects. And he considered, and he also looked at like all the shadow dramas. He looked at it's called conspiracy theories. I actually I'm a conspiracy realist, okay, you know, and so he said, if you have fear about this, don't go there. But from an Aquarian perspective, it's an exercise in consciousness to be able to say, yeah, that might be possible. Yeah, that might be possible. Yeah, that might be happening. You know, taking in all the scenarios and, okay, what, all right, I'm not afraid to look at that, all right? You know, so it's a way of freeing and completely all possible lines of probability, but very important, without repression of awareness or manipulation of physical, mental, or spiritual aspects. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind here. Okay, and then if we go now back to Taurus,
To the Taurus quotes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Taurus quotes. Many people are alive, but don't touch the miracle of being alive. These are just marvelous expressions of the joy of being in a physical body without having to prove anything. Just having a body, the journey of involution. So there's something that we don't have here, but I was thinking about this recently, Kaylin, is that to me, one of the real Taurian heroes is a man named Nicholas Roerich, who journeyed to the Gobi in the 20s, and he was an amazing, one of these polymaths who influenced a lot of people back in those years. And his Taurian view was that hospitals and prisons should be like museums with works of art. So if you happen to be incarcerated, whether it's in a prison or whether you find yourself confined in a hospital, it should be beauty that you're surrounded with, And I thought that was a tremendously revolutionary thing. Unfortunately, it's not really been followed, except maybe in just limited ways in certain areas, Can you imagine a hospital that's not just all white, or where they actually serve good food, things like that, right? Or prisons too, How do you do rehabilitation unless you reintroduce people to beauty and aesthetics? Okay. So I think we want to go next to maybe the Jupiter-Saturn configuration before we start looking at some of these charts.
Do you want to talk about Jupiter first a little bit, or no?
We kind of did. I mean, I think we can maybe keep the Jupiter thing simple. It expands whatever it hits. And there's a theme each year of whatever sign Jupiter is in that will be like the Dharma of that year. Jupiter is currently in Capricorn, but it will move into Aquarius in conjunction with Aquarius at the end of the year. And so then we have the year 2021, 1 year in 12, where Jupiter is activating the Dharma, the way of life, the duty. It's like the primary spiritual path or theme of humans at that point is Aquarius, Jupiter and Aquarius. And then we have that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that only happens about every 20 years. And it could be said now that this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that's coming up is the Great Mutation. I mean, it was it did go into the air sign once, but then it went back into Earth. But now for the next, I forget how many years it is, is it 400 years, 700 years? I forgot to research that again before this call. But all Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions for hundreds of years now are going to be in an air sign. And so that one comes in at the end of the year, Jupiter conjunct Saturn in Aquarius. So that would be, pardon me?
I just wanted to say something for people to know is it won't be in Aquarius, it's going to filter through all the air signs. It'll be Aquarius, and it'll be Gemini, and it'll be Libra.
Yes, all the air signs.
Every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn come together, and it will be in a different sign each time, but it's like 400 years or whatever, however that length of time is in an air sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been in Earth.
It's been in Earth recently.
Right.
That's just another way of perceiving this alchemical play between earth and air. Aquarius being air and Taurus being earth. You know, that's another example of that. If it was only Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in Aquarius, well, that would seem to be like all things Aquarius are just, you know, expanded. I mean, it's all becomes Aquarian. But I wanted to look into this one here and to make sure you have this one on the table before we explore some of these charts. I think yes. Yes to that question.
That was in 2000. The last Jupiter Saturn conjunction was in 2000, 20 years ago.
And that was in Taurus.
Yeah, it was late degrees Taurus. Yeah.
So I want to start by showing you some stuff that maybe some of you haven't thought about, which is the strange and interesting relationship between the United States and the People's Republic of China. Let's look at the chart of China. October 1st, 1949. Jupiter, 22 Capricorn. But look at this. Moon, 3 Aquarius, rising sign 5 Aquarius. Which basically means that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction coming up at the end of the year, early next year, is exactly on their moon and ascendant. And this year, it's in a Jupiter return. Now, I want you to also note Mars in Leo and Venus in Scorpio. Okay. Let's next look at the chart of Mao Zedong. If there's anybody who is the living embodiment of the People's Republic of China, it's this chart. 14-degree Leo moon, Mars in Scorpio, 13 degrees Capricorn rising. But I want to also point out something else here. And it's a theme I'm going to suggest as we go through the charts of the primary technocrats, global corporations. You'll see what I mean as we go through them. Is the astounding lack of empathy. And what we now know about Mao Zedong is that actually approximately 60 million people were killed during his reign. I just recently read one of the more recent biographies of him. And as far as I can see, the current ruling Politburo or whatever of China, even Xi, they're totally following in the footsteps of this. You know, they still glorify Mao. The same original vision of Mao and then the People's Republic of China is continued with Xi. But look at this chart. Can you imagine? And he was like a mass murderer. I mean, he didn't really care. One time he said, "We do not care." He wanted to instigate a nuclear war. So we could lose half our population and we're still going to run the world. It didn't matter. There was absolutely no empathy of that entire chart. And if you know anything about his life, there was none in his personal life and in the way he ran China. So let's look at Xi. Now, unfortunately, we don't know, it is not known his birth time. So you cannot look at the angles here.
I just ran a noon chart, and that's a typical thing to do when you don't know a birth time, because then if the moon is changing signs that day, you can kind of see if it did. And 10 hours before, it might have been in Cancer, if he was born like right after midnight, perhaps.
Now, he does have Mars in Cancer. which is, you know, he's like the father of his people, you know, taking care of China. I just found out today, by the way, that weird things are happening in China. Do you all know that there's no coronavirus in either Shanghai or Beijing? Everything went completely on, no lockdown, nothing. Everything is just completely just the same way it always has been. It's the only stock market that, you know, 50% of the stock markets have crashed around the world, but not China. It's just slightly lower. But I want you to pay special attention here. Moon at 5 Leo, South Node 3 Leo, North Node 3 Aquarius.
Now, Daniel, that's what I'm saying. If he had been born like just after midnight, could possibly have a Cancer moon, because the moon's moving about 1 degree every 2 hours. Could be, but it's probably likely it's Leo moon, and he would have had to been born right after right at midnight or right after.
So. And just his behavior is certainly Leo moon
right.
behavior.
Much more Leo.
Leader for life, right?
Right.
Just like Mao.
Right.
So, but look at the nodal axis. Now, next, let's look at the U.S. chart. Look here. Of course, the U.S. is Aquarius moon, but look at the nodal axis. 6 Aquarius, 6 Leo.
Guess where Uranus is right now?
So there's this very, very strange and weird connection between the U.S. chart, Mao Zedong, and the People's Republic of China, and Xi. You put the pieces together. We know that Google has transferred their technology to China. The social scoring program and the complete control of the country through technocratic control was practiced there first. And now, of course, it's being rolled out in the United States. You know, practice on China first. You know, we could say maybe China said, let's do it. I mean, they wanted to do it. I mean, they're totally in favor of it. They've been technocratic from the very beginning. Kind of reminds me of the Borg.
Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated.
Already today in China, if you don't score well on your social credit score, you have to take third-class trains. You can't fly, or you can't buy the same food in the store, that kind of thing. So it seems the way the U.S. is going is following the Chinese model, actually. And we can see it in the charts. However, what's spooky to me is the fact that with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, if you had to look at this and make a prediction, right, it looks really good for China. It looks good for those charts. I mean, what could be better? I mean, Jupiter return and then look, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the moon and the ascendant. Pretty interesting. And a chart also lacking in empathy. There's no empathy on that. Now, let's go to some of our U.S. technocrats. Let's take a look at Elon Musk.
Okay, it's going to take me a little while to find where he is, because there he is.
20 degrees Mars in Aquarius, Virgo moon.
This is also a noon chart, so we don't know that.
We don't know his rising sign.
Right.
And of course, Elon Musk is good buddies with Donald Trump. And he is the one, if you don't know, is responsible for having the permission to put, I think it's it's either 24,000 or 42,000 satellites in orbit, in low Earth orbit, to blanket the Earth in 5G. That's Mr. Musk, who is involved with that. And for those that live in California, I don't know if you're aware of this, that your governor, Gavin Newsom, has hired Elon Musk and Tim Cook to be his advisors in the lockdown of California. Very interesting. So it's kind of like the Silicon Valley cult is actually running the California government at this point. I have great concern about what this guy's up to. I don't know if he's the complete architect behind it, but somehow he has the permission of the world governments in order to put up these satellites. And he pretty much, until the last few weeks, when people have been in lockdown and are doing some research on this, and there's been a lot of pushback starting now. I mean, even here in the Philippines, there's a local organization called Stop 5G Philippines, which is pretty interesting. But it's going forth, and it's actually not ever been tested on people. The 5G is everything from 23 gigahertz to 60 gigahertz, and that includes weapon technology. It also can show the research on it, which shows that it actually displaces oxygen molecules. Right. So, a lot again. I don't. You can do your own research on this, but this guy, I think, is he's a technocrat, and his grandfather was the head of the Canadian Technocracy Party. Now let's look at Peter Thiel.
I just want to say something really quickly, because as you had mentioned, there was really no empathy, and you might think there could be some empathy with the Sun, Mercury, and Cancer. We don't know that there's midheavens there, but Uranus is square it. Mm-hmm. So that might mean that it's going to not really operate in the way that we would imagine. And you want to look at Peter Thiel next?
Well, yeah, but I say, in shamanic astrology, we look more at Mars and the moon, and hopefully if we have the ascendant, then the sun sign.
Right.
Yeah, so Peter Thiel.
I'm looking for him.
So Elon Musk and Peter Thiel were the ones who invented PayPal. They were called the PayPal Mafia. This guy is also good buddies with Trump. And right now, his main involvement is with something called Palantir, which is a global surveillance private company. What the Palantir? Yeah, you can look that up. Palantir. This guy is in the inner circle with Trump, and that's why I have a hard time believing Trump is wearing the white hats, because he is basically involved with these technocrats it's just a different group of technocrats. You know, this is an alleged libertarian technocrat, right-wing technocrat. But you'll also notice there, Capricorn moon. And you'll notice Mars and Sag. We don't have a birth time on this guy. You know, so there's also, he basically it's just an overdevelopment of the intellect, and really no empathy. Mercury and Scorpio. I mean, just watch these people. They're kind of not out in the. They're not revealing themselves as much as we can see through these charts. Okay, how about Mr. Gates?
How about him, if I can find him?
And if you all, I'm sure you know that this is the guy behind the Vaccinate the World program. He's put actually $45 billion of his money into vaccinating the world. He's on record as saying he wants a certain tattoo to be put on people to say that they've been vaccinated. and here there's certain we don't know for sure. I mean, they say if you go online, you can say there's different versions of what his birth time is. Aries moon, Scorpio sun, but here we have that interesting combo of Scorpio sun, Mars, and Libra. The silver-tongued devil. One that, oh wow, he's a good guy. Wow, he's a philanthropist. Oh wow. But his actual agenda, working with the CDC and the WHO, track him. Find out what he's really been saying. In fact, this whole pandemic we're involved in was set up in October. I mean, you can see it online, how they planned this whole thing out. And it's all according to their plan happening right now. In October, they had a meeting. It's actually, you can find it on YouTube, how they actually set this whole thing up. Okay, next we have Zuckerberg, or I call him Zuckerborg. Try to find some empathy there. And we do now know that Zuckerberg introduced Facebook the day after military intelligence stopped their own version. It was transferred to him. And it's always been connected to surveillance programs. And this guy, of course, started to get exposed when Jupiter was going over his Saturn, Mars, and Moon early last year. And he's also you can see he's also in his Jupiter return too. So it's look, I mean, just these charts just are stunning to me. I mean, they're the most exact kind of things we would expect from technocrats and people without empathy. I'm making that judgment, but I'm just using, you know, shamanic astrology tools here. Zuckerberg, you know, who's well known for that quote that, wow, millions want to give me their personal data, stupid fucks. That's his quote. Okay. Who else do we have on the list here? Well, Steve Bannon, we can just spend a minute with him. What makes him interesting to me is that he took the book, The Fourth Turning, and he used it for his own agenda, which was to help dismantle the system and to, you know, destroy the United States by aligning with white nationalists and you know, now he's involved mainly with the European right wing. And look at this chart. Another silver-tongued devil, but look at the Leo moon. Sag sun.
With Pluto on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that could manifest as the destroyer. Also, Uranus to the south nodes might suggest that that's bringing an Aquarian flavor in from its past.
The Pluto moon is that he basically, you know, clashed with Trump, you know, and you can only be one Leo.
Right. Yeah. Pluto square Venus. So.
Kadia, I don't know. That's something interesting for me to look at. Thank you for that. Don't know about that.
Asking, what about Stephen Miller?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to, oh yes. This is, of all the, Amazon, of course, is the Borg. You know, we will assimilate everything. Well, look at this chart. Looks like he's going to be successful. Look, Jupiter conjunct the Sun and Mars in Capricorn. Aries rising. Do you Sag moon? You see any empathy there?
Nope.
And it's weird that if you really want to research this guy, there was an Atlantic magazine had a cover story on him, researching his life. It's, you know, what does Jeff Bezos want? And it was a mock-up of his brain. And he claims to have been influenced when he was young by Captain Picard. And that was his hero when he was growing up, Captain Picard in Star Trek. But quite frankly, he's actually more represents the Borg, not Picard, you know.
Maybe Picard when he was a Borg.
Yeah, maybe so.
Right.
And then you'll see also that that Saturn and Jupiter were going to be up to his Saturn and Venus too. You know? I mean, I don't know what'll happen, and I think he's lost a wife recently. I don't know if he might not have a lot of success in his love life, but you know, Jupiter conjunct Saturn, and his Saturn return next year.
Right.
So, I mean, if you did a prediction on it, it looks actually rather good for this guy to succeed in his plans. Okay. Let's now go to that one you found, which is a really marvelous synthesis of all of this. Ayn Rand. Look at this chart. Tell me if you can find any empathy there. Capricorn moon. Look at all the aqua. Leo rising. Anyway, she does in fact have Venus in Pisces, but you know, so but it's squared by Uranus.
Right.
She has been a huge influence on a lot of these people that I've been mentioning. So go down to she was the one who, these are her, a summary of her political and world views, a shadow expression of Aquarius. Altruism is bad, self-interest is good. Reason is the only way to look at the world. Emotions, mysticism, faith are all bad. A tiny elite of great men, top businessmen, are really what holds up the world. The rest are simply leeching off this elite. They're variously described as irrational parasites, dishonest, thieving loafers, compromising knaves, sniveling neurotics, and both a beggar and a sucker. You know, kind of like what some of the elite have been heard saying off camera, like, we have to get rid of the useless feeders. All regulation, including police force, firemen, and law courts, is unnecessary, simply a hindrance to the elite. Journalists are bad because they ask questions. Politicians are bad because they seek to make laws, etc. Money is the best measure of a person's worth. It's amazing. Keep going with it. That slide, Galen.
Oh, if you're not a laissez-faire capitalist, you're a socialist.
Mm-hmm. Laissez-faire here means absent governments not interfering in the workings of the free market.
Socialism is really, really bad and will take over and destroy everything. These are just a few of the things, but oh my gosh, do they speak to it. And then what is really interesting is all the people. She wrote, of course, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and all of these ideas are intrinsic in these novels and these stories. And so Alan Greenspan, who is head of the Federal Reserve for 17 years, was a member of her inner group, a cult group. And basically he says that what she did through long discussions and lots of arguments into the night was to make me think why capitalism is not only efficient and practical, but also moral. Donald Trump says The Fountainhead is his favorite book. Paul Ryan he stepped down, but he was a Republican leader of the House, and he gives a copy of Atlas Shrugged to all his new employees. Ron and Rand Paul, Daniel Hannan, who's the British member of the European Parliament and the brains behind Brexit, and he's a big follower of hers. Sajid Javid, the UK's current housing minister, reads the court scene from The Fountainhead twice a year. Like, why? Travis.
You think what you all don't know is that if you've studied Ayn Rand's life, she was a complete hypocrite. I mean, she was more than happy to receive Social Security and government benefits.
Right.
She lived off of it.
Right. Travis Kalanick, who is the disgraced Uber boss, is a big fan of Ayn Rand, and his Twitter avatar for a long time was The Fountainhead. And even the name Uber has uncomfortable overtones of supremacism. Peter Thiel, who we just talked about, billionaire founder of PayPal, big Trump supporter, investor in Facebook, is a big fan. And Rush Limbaugh. And this I thought was really interesting, that Rush Limbaugh says It's basically about the achievers of life quitting because they're tired of being 1% of the population pulling the other 99% in the carts. And basically that was one of her techniques in the books, to make the super rich look like victims of society. And she wrote her characters, this is what the character said in the book: the first right on earth is the right of the ego. Man's first duty is to himself. I wish to come here and say that the integrity of a man's creative work is of greater importance than any charitable endeavor. Those of you who do not understand this are destroying the world. Yeah.
So let's bring this around to the very first question posed, which I believe is the inquiry we need to be making. That if there is a global reset happening, just beginning, involving everything, what is it being reset to? And then that goes into the question, what does it mean to be human? Most of the people that I love and trust, as well as my own life experience, is to be fully human means having compassion and empathy. And if you don't have that, then of course you're going to want to go to an AI agenda. And so be on the lookout for anti-human agendas. Now, I know there's going to be people that say, what's wrong with AI? You know, maybe I would like to connect into quantum computing and so on, and have this thing implanted behind our ear to connect into the global commuter. I know that for me personally, I stand for organic, and I stand for, I go by how it feels when I look at all the sources of information. Lisa Renee, and I actually gave the quote in the first class, that if you're looking at some source of information and it feels steely, if it feels like knives, if it feels metallic, you're very likely to be dealing with an AI type manipulation. I certainly am continually advising people to stay up to date on researching what 5G is, what it's actually doing. I don't want to get into all the different possible scenarios here. I'm just basically saying be awake. And in fact, probably one of my favorite positive or idealistic Aquarian approaches, which I thought was really what Aquarius was about: question everything. Question everything. Don't be a sheep and believe in technical experts, scientists, that kind of thing. They have an agenda. If you know what that agenda is, just see what their writings are. It's actually all out in the open. It is said that there is a cosmic law that you have to tell the truth. So basically, the way they tell the truth is through movies, through television shows, through dystopian. As the way David Icke puts it, is like they want a Hunger Games society, actually. So just question it. Don't fall in line with the mainstream media. It's just going crazy now. There's rational voices out there that say, look at the real data. So then maybe the last thing I'll say before we open this up, we will have to this year, and as we go into the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius at the end of the year, and as we reach the Saturn square Uranus, and we didn't share the dates on that one, maybe go back to if you can, Kaylin, easily go back to the Saturn-Uranus dates. Saturn square Uranus, February, it's a triple one, February 17th, June 14th, and December 24th, 2021. You can see where it's happening. But interestingly, it's only the first 3 months, December through March, December this year through March, that Jupiter is a player. Jupiter is actually moving through the signs very fast. So it's really only in that time period that the Jupiter effect of amplifying the square is in play. Just as the transit of Jupiter in 1968 to the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, well, if you research 1968, it was the debacle of the Democratic Convention. It was the assassination of RFK. You know, I mean, that's basically when what do we call the countercultural humanistic matriarchy Aquarian age dream at that point kind of was short-circuited, and it shifted after that into what we've seen. The march toward technocracy, the shadow of Aquarius. I'm glad that Taurus is involved, because when you have Taurus involved with Scorpio at the other side, and then you have Leo and Aquarius, you have actually some possibility of a synthesis here. But Shamanic Astrology Mystery School stands with the organic, the earth, the love of the earth, not getting off world, going, you know, not the hijack of the, you know, what do they call it? The astral hijack of the new age, light polarization, you know, only being in the celestial. Our first presentation was about the three worlds, and always keep that in mind. There's three happening at the same time. Be aware of the middle world. Know that this whole experiment, you never know. This whole experience, the Great Mother may have something else in store here. And my prayer actually is that she does something to help this situation. Because it seems that the last time we were in this predicament, which was World War II, which could have gone another direction, there does seem to have been some kind of intervention at that point, because as a result of World War II, we had the establishment of the largest middle class in the history of the world. And, you know, so it can go in different directions when you're at the end of a fourth turning, when there's a big shift happening into a different cycle. But then we could look at the lower world or the underworld. I mean, according to the Australian Aborigines, it could well be that this is the end of the whole experiment, not just another cycle. That's what they're saying. Anything can happen. I don't know. But question everything and tune in to our humanity. Concern for those, God, I'm faced with it here in the Philippines. Millions and millions of really very poor people have no food. They're not distributing it. And the president of this country over here said, if anyone breaks the lockdown, shoot them. That's what we're dealing with here. Anyway, I think that's I'm sure there's so much more. You can see what a vast subject this is. I've tried my best to summarize the main points, but this is just to give you some tools to work with as the unfoldment of Uranus and Neptune, Uranus and Saturn happens here. And look at history on it, you know, 1942, 1988. And now we're in the square coming up. And the meaning of the square is crisis in action. Yeah. Yes, Nexus. Yeah, they had a conference that we had. I've become friends with Duncan Rhodes, and he shared a lot of it with me. But also, they had a conference called something like the Hidden Secrets of Australia, where they have interviews with them regarding what the Aborigines are finally telling the truth about right now. A lot of stuff about Australia. The fact that it was actually terraformed. They were not simple hunter-gatherers. When the Europeans first showed up, it was the Aborigines had been managing that landscape for maybe 100,000 years. That all was suppressed, repressed, that information. It's worth checking out. By the way, the latest issue of Nexus exposes the identity of who Q is. If any of you follow QAnon, if that's something, a rabbit hole you want to go down, you can find out about that. He's 29 years old, and see what you think if you watch one of his videos. I can't even watch it. It's he wants that chip, that quantum computing thing happening. He's like a robot. I think he's already a cyborg, actually. Very, very interesting to go down these rabbit holes. But remember our humanity, question everything. What does it really mean to be human? Okay.
Good things to
You have
think
anything
about.
you want to?
I just want to say that we're going to have our next class tomorrow. That'll be the last in the series of 4. We'll be looking at the Venus and Mars new synodic cycles, the June and July eclipses, answering your questions, or maybe some other things that we haven't thought of that we'll be also looking at. So stay tuned. We'd love to have you join us for that. And I think we need to now just open it up. You can raise your hand. You can unmute yourself. Yeah, so those are the main things that you can do too. If you have any comments, suggestions, screams of outrage.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And also we're not asking people to see it from this perspective, just to consider this perspective. Right, Daniel?
Yeah. It is each individual's free choice, but make sure it really is a free choice.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I've got Karina. I'm gonna unmute you. Hello. Let's see.
I was already unmuted.
Oh, you were already unmuted. Okay.
I just have a quick question about the underworld.
Yes.
I was thinking about that last night, and I thought, well, that must be the subconscious or unconscious mind. Mm-hmm. But I'm getting the impression from that graph that I may be off on that.
It's actually a concept that goes back to, taken from Shamanism 101. So that originally in, pre-psychologically sophisticated times, the underworld also included, under the ocean. It included, the chthonic realm. It included, the lava under the earth, the cave systems. It's like the power coming from the center of the earth out. But it's an irrational force. It's not like Saturn, which tries to figure things out from a moral perspective, as it were, whatever system you follow. So that it's unexpected. It's designed to create composting, but in more modern times, then yes, the buried contents of our unconscious and subconscious is also included in the underworld realm. So the word shadow is often used here, but the simple definition we use for that is simply that it's whatever it is consciousness has not been aware of. This actually unconsciously running us. It's the ability to be able to integrate that. It's like what Jung said, the goal of our life is not perfection, it's wholeness. And the only way to gain that wholeness is the integration of the shadow. So it's like we need the underworld dimension.
So if you were going to have archetypes for the 3 worlds, you would actually have, it would be more than 144, wouldn't it be? Like 12 cubed?
Well, we allocate Pluto and Chiron to the underworld, but also there are cycles that happen in life with Chiron and Pluto, whether it's the timeline cycles or whether it's the transits of outer planets that put a person through the underworld process. As one of my teachers says, that what the world is undergoing is a collective dark night of the soul. But we have to remember that that in the spiritual process of awakening, and this is Jean Houston that first presented this in a very beautiful way, that the 7th of 8 stages of gaining self-awareness, enlightenment, our spiritual journey, the 7th of the 8 stages is the dark night. So this actually, and this could go in any direction. I mean, I'm told that the plan, I called it a plandemic, has not worked as well as they wanted, because the virus itself is not that, it's not killing off as many as they wanted, you know. So
Yeah.
basically it's giving all of us a chance in this quote lockdown time to be doing research, do reading, work on ourselves, look at our own issues, and plus when we come out of this, months of you know, no pollution, you know, there still
Right.
is,
Or
you know,
really reduced.
basically a kind of a restoring of the planet to what it could be. We just want to make sure that it doesn't go back to how it was before.
Right. Yeah.
There's always there's both things happening. I'm told that there's an equal amount. It's like a battle between light and dark to a certain extent. There's a huge amount of golden sun energy coming in that is giving us an opportunity to heal our DNA, to be able to fulfill our life purpose. At the same time, there's also a huge force that's attempting to implement the complete technocratic dream of you know, creating a slave race that have not been able to connect with our pineal gland. Steiner warned us in 1917 that whenever there is non-native EMFs, starting with radar, and then going to each level of EMF, it's destroying the integrity of the cells and shutting down the pineal gland. It's like an attempt to prevent people from having contact to their spiritual self.
In a way, it's like what happened with Atlantis. You know, the stories that we have about what happened with Atlantis and the high technology and how they basically destroyed it. But that was one continent. Now we've got it all around the world. So, but hopefully we have enough people who are also awake and aware who can hold another energetic field that is a higher vibrational field. So we won't have to be destroyed.
Boy,
so
we have
when,
a lot of people on the chat there. I want to have a chance to look at that now. Huh.
Michael, were you complete?
well, it was just on that, on the underworld, you said it's associated with Pluto and Saturn, right?
Chiron.
Chiron, Pluto and Chiron, right. But every single sign has a shadow material.
Yep.
And
Yes,
so
yes, that's right.
are you saying that those qualities of the various signs are stimulated by transits with, or aspects to Pluto and Chiron?
Well, your question is actually rather complex, because part of, you know, the comment I made earlier that a lot of the conventional sun sign descriptions often turn out to be a description of their shadow. That there's a lot of shadow in every one of them, you know. So if a person has Scorpio rising, they usually have to encounter the shadow of Scorpio. It may not even be their own material, but it's what has happened in the last 4,000 or 5,000 years with what I talked about in the first class. Every one of them does. I mean, Leo rising people, I mean, whenever I try to have some degree of compassion for two well-known Leo risings, Boy George, you know, George Bush III or whatever, who's Leo rising, and Donald Trump, Mars and Leo rising. You know, it's like, what are they doing? You know, it's like it's an immature embracing of an NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. I'm the decider. I'm the one in charge. You know, we can't have anybody competing with me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's that shadow.
Praise me and tell me how great I am.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely shadow in every archetype and every rising sign. And then if we have a moon position, we can sometimes carry the shadow. I mean, I have a Capricorn moon. I have a huge Capricorn moon shadow. You know, I'm on a bad day, it's like I'm an arrogant know-it-all. You know, I have researched the subject, sir. You have not. You know, I mean, I told you all in 2017. Nobody listened. You know, stuff like that. I can go there if geez. I mean, it's just trying to help. You know, just trying to help.
So I think we need
Complete,
to.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you, Michael. We think we need to hear from Karina, and you are unmuted, Karina.
Okay, great. I have something in my chart that I think really is well, I'm curious what you would say. I have Chiron retrograde in my natal chart in Aquarius at 13 degrees, exactly square my north and south node at 13 degrees of north node at 13 degrees of Scorpio, south node 13 degrees of Taurus. And I don't know what it means, and I don't know in a shamanic astrology what a retrograde planet in a natal chart means. And I also have that Chiron opposed Uranus at 8 degrees in Leo. So I just wondered what because I watched all the Aquarius shadow thing, and I'm just going, man, that's really talking about my chart.
Well, okay, just a quick thing here. With the exception of Mercury, Venus, and Mars, we place very little attention on the outer planet retrogrades because they are retrograde for so much of the year. It's more of a function of the fact that it's an outer planet with a long orbit that corresponds more with the solar cycle. You can do it's not the first thing I would look at if I looked at your chart, but if we look at the meaning of that, of Chiron in that configuration with your nodal axis, I think what it's saying is what's the best of Aquarius? Seeing the bigger view. And then integrate Taurus and Scorpio. And it's the challenges, I don't know the rest of your chart, but I mean, if you've had tendencies to in any way gravitate to what I was calling the astral hijack of the New Age, I'm not suggesting you have, but use the best of Aquarius to perceive this way in which Taurus and Scorpio can actually help rejuvenate the planet, to bring life force and passion and enjoyment and pleasure and, the rehabilitation of the sexual centers and things like that into play. And so Chiron is like saying that's where the part of your karmic, not karmic, maybe more dharmic, it would be maybe not the most important thing, because I said look at some other things on your chart first, but it would be on your list of to-do list. It's beyond your to-do list for the dharma of the current life.
Okay, thank you.
Does it make any sense?
Yeah, I knew it was important. I knew it was. I've always known. I just I don't know what to do with it. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's less personal. It's actually placing you within a certain monadic karmic group that has a specific function.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so I don't have any other hands up. Has anybody else unmuted themselves and want to say anything? We have like probably a minute or two we could.
I'm looking at these on this chat box.
Right.
You mentioned Nexus.
Laura?
Nexus magazine, Nexus magazine, and you can actually go to the Nexus news feed, and they also sell their DVDs of the conferences they did. It's out of Brisbane area of Australia. What about potential immediate? What is this? So
California.
I don't know.
Anything's possible.
What is this? This last one, would my chatbot is kind of cut off.
Would that energy be described as the kundalini of the earth? I think you were talking about.
Or a Scorpio, yes, indeed, yeah. It's the planet Earth is a living being, and the restoration of its ley lines, the restoration of its life force. It's going through its own dark night of the soul, as I'm sure you know. But fortunately, it's much more likely to endure than us.
So Daniel, we have Laura and Amuna, and then I think we'll be done. So Laura.
Hi, Kaylin. Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
Question about, or wondering if any of you have looked at Elon Musk's girlfriend. Her name is Grimes. She's a Canadian musician. And there was something that just really rubbed me the wrong way about her. But honestly, then I looked into it a little bit more, and I really love her music. And and they decided to, you know, make this cyborg baby that they're going to have. And she was writing on Twitter, like, just so disconnected from the idea of that this is a human baby and I should take this.
They're into that. I mean, that's what they want. They want to merge with AI.
It's super duper weird. And I've said to you before and have been in defense of Elon in some ways, but yeah, that took it over the edge. But then when I listened to her music, it's very, very Aquarian and ethereal, but it's really good. I really liked it.
Well, yeah. I mean, your taste in music, as you probably know, Elon is a great veteran of going to Burning Man. You know, so I'm sure that he loves, you know, avant-garde, unusual, interesting music. But then a lot of the Silicon Valley cult are also, they're the ones that created Burning Man to begin with. You know, so you have to be very careful about that. I mean, musical tastes are unique and individualistic. You know, if you love that kind of music, that's magnificent. You know, some people love synthesizer and electronic music. Other people want to have real drummers or, you know, real bass players. You know, so that's personal taste.
Sure.
But thanks for bringing that up. I didn't even know he had another girlfriend now, because I do remember when Amber Heard was hanging out with him.
Oh no, this is huge because she got pregnant right away, and it was just a very unusual the way she handled that she was pregnant, and in such a disrespectful way of that this is a baby. You know, it was just it's very interesting. I just encourage you to look into it.
Yeah, thanks. What's her name?
Grimes, Grimes.
Oh yeah, I like to track these things.
Oh gosh, yeah, totally. Check it out, you'll love it.
Just like check out this guy who is Mr. Q. You know, his stuff is. Just see what you think. If you watch, you might like it. I couldn't. It just grated against me big time, and that's this guy Austin Steinbeck.
Interesting. And you know.
Austin Stein Bart, sorry.
You know that Amazon man owns the Washington Post too.
Yeah.
And their tagline is "Democracy dies in darkness." And I'm a recruiter, so I got online and I looked for their head of brand strategy, and I was like, how come? Why would you show the dark side rather, like the way that Trump does, rather than beacon for a strong democracy or something positive? Right. So I wrote to the guy. We'll see if he gets back to me.
By the way, just one thing I just found out, which is that Zoom, the prime financer of Zoom, is a Chinese billionaire who is a member of the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, and a lot of stories coming out in the tech world now about this the security of Zoom isn't at all cracked up to be what anything, you know. So here we are on Zoom and Facebook groups, and we're in the web.
Well, I have to say that I have no control over this. It's an area of complete surrender for me.
Yeah.
And this is really strange. The evangelical Christian community and the more progressive aspect of the metaphysical communities have the same opinion, because they're preventing people from going to church. You see, they also is one segment of the population that is also opposed to vaccinations and opposed to the implanting of a chip, you know, clandestinely, which is what Bill Gates wants to happen around the world. You know, so it's fascinating that they are also, a lot of the so-called conspiracy stuff that is out there is Christian. Because they're being prevented from gathering, you know, like when two or more gather in my name, you know, then, you know, the Spirit is present. I've stood for in-person gatherings for years, and here we are virtually, you know. I sure hope they let us get together again in person.
Right.
Someone put in about, the show Star Trek Picard, very interesting. And the other one that actually deals into this is an amazing show. I watch these things just to see, you know, what's the clues that are being given from the shows, right? And the other one is Westworld. I mean, if you look at Westworld season 3, blow your mind. I mean, you'd think it's like, it's not a TV show, you know, it's right now. Huh.
So we need to hear from Amuna because she has her hand up, and then I think we can be done because we're kind of past our time.
I know, but this is.
I know it's
Yeah.
important. But we also have tomorrow.
I'm unmuted right now, right?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, this was really fabulous again. I'm so glad I could make it live. It's very scary, actually, to hear all this. And here I am, of course, you know, I have my Saturn and Jupiter return coming up next year with Saturn, Mercury, Mars, South Node, Jupiter, and my Sun in Aquarius. I mean, my saving grace, as you know, is that I have Venus in this rising sign in Pisces. You know, otherwise I would probably be terrible. But so I'm so dreaming up this world where we wake up, because enough of us wake up to the oneness of all life, it becomes a contagious force faster than a virus, where people suddenly go, oh, if I torture someone and I hurt myself when I hurt someone else, I drop the instrument of torture, and the great miracle is the victim doesn't pick it up and hit me over the head, but the victim actually has compassion with the victimizer. And so there's a real opportunity. Refugee camps can be empty, you know, we can learn so much. So I guess we still need to also really conjure that up, right? That would be rising the vibration.
That's what I was referring to before, is that my sources and teachers, basically there's like two forces, so that there is a marvelous, amazing, we could call it an ascension energy, golden sun energy that's coming in. And meanwhile, the counter force is happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can hijack actually this pandemic for our own purpose, to educate ourselves and to remember who we really are.
Mm-hmm. So do you have anything to add to the fact, just on a personal level, with all that Aquarius, Saturn, Jupiter stuff?
Yes, just very, this is a slightly complicated, but it comes up in all the readings I'm doing now, which is that global events like this kind of trump, sorry, wrong word, it tends to be so dramatically powerful that we all are at the effect of it, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But depending on what your own individual cycles are, you can navigate it in different ways. So that if you've got like triple jackpots, so if you got Jupiter, you know, Jupiter, Saturn coming together on a very important part of your chart, you should be able to navigate it easier than some other people, you know. So it's still going to be something you can feel good about.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And really, thank you so much. I got to see Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter this morning again, and sent you blessings. And without you, a shamanic astrology mystery school, I would not know this. I so love that you bring the sky into this, as well as the metaphysics. So thank you. If
we're not able to get to because we have a really active group today, the chat has been going crazy here, and if you haven't had your question or your sharing dealt with here, just email us, okay?
And or show up tomorrow. So you either
yes.
email us or show up tomorrow, and we'll address it then. Yeah. So that would be awesome. So I think then we are complete for today, and we'll see you all again tomorrow, same times, different Zoom link that will be sent out soon and is on the class page. So yay.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for your enthusiasm and interest, and question everything.
Good mantra.
Bye. Blessings to all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.